Yo, what is going on, guys? Godrekton here today, bringing you a new guide for Split 2 Season 13. So it's been a while since I've made any kind of videos recently, and I'm not going to go into the whole same thing as always. I'm a very busy person these days, and I'm trying to do as much as I can with a lot of other things right now. But I do just want to say though, I'm going to try and add some more content. I've been working on a lot of videos behind the scenes, so you guys are surely going to get a lot of content this month. So I'm definitely going to try to keep consistently uploading, and also upload a lot on my TikToks if you guys want to check that out. And also make sure to check my stream too, that's where else I have been. So if you guys ever want to see consistent content from me, I highly recommend to check out my Twitch. But now that's out of the way, let's get into the video. So why are you guys here today? We are going to be talking about Renekton builds within Season 13. Now you guys might have already known that I've currently have a guide that I did make a couple months ago. However, since then, a lot of things have changed, and I haven't had any chance to talk about it. So this will be the video where I'm going to go over every mythic, and I'm going to be talking about every main item that Renekton wants to build, and I'm also going to share my favorite builds and the best builds you guys should use while Renekton is also very strong. So you guys might have noticed there that I said Renekton was very strong. Why is Renekton very strong? I'm not sure what patch it was now because I've been on and off away from the game. But essentially, Renekton had some buffs towards his ultimate where the cooldown got lowered, he has extra damage, and Riot also lowered the E-dash cooldown by 2 seconds. All these buffs have made Renekton a lot stronger in a meta where a lot of his top lane opposition isn't really good right now, which makes Renekton a standout pick that is very strong against everything. Even your typical range champions, Renekton excels against them simply due to the fact that he has to stay with his Q, he has Doran's Shield, Second Wind, and he has a lot of items in being able to deal with these champions too. Whether that's going Stridebreaker, whether that's also going a Ghostblade, or any type of early item that nullifies poke, like a Warden's Mail, Bramble Vest, you name it, right? Renekton can basically deal with whatever he's against. And that makes Renekton a very strong standout pick, and why he's currently so good within the solo queue element of the game, as well as pro play. So now that we've covered why Renekton is strong, we haven't even got to the build yet, which is another factor why Renekton is so strong. Currently, a lot of items got changed for Renekton ever since the, just before the split 2. I did stop playing around with this part a little bit, but within this time frame, they did buff Ghostblade and made it into a mythic. They also removed Prowler's Claw, which was a big asset to full ID Renekton. While that now has been removed, it's certainly not the end of Renekton, however. Renekton with the Goredrinker buffs, as well as other items like Black Cleaver gain, a little bit of gold decrease, I believe, and some other items that also got touched. It's made Renekton into a very strong champion. Steric's Gauge as well is back on the list as well of items you want to get. Typically, again, this is a second item, has led Renekton to being an actual mid-game monster, which hasn't really been a thing for a long time since all the Bruiser items got changed, but now that he has that power again with the mid-game, he's able to single-handedly carry games, and I have a lot of examples of this, and I will be uploading them to my YouTube channel in the form of highlights. But with that also said though, Renekton is just overall super strong right now with item choices. So, where do we begin when we talk about this build guide? What am I going to be teaching you guys today? So, overall, I'm going to be explaining every single mythic here that you see on the screen. I have various different item sets. I'm going to be going over these one by one. I will timestamp the video too, so do not worry for people that just want to, rush into the video and look at certain things. I'm going to have it all pointed out for you, so do not worry. Another thing that we'll also be talking about is items that I don't think are really good either. As you can see here, I have a couple slots. So we'll talk about each mythic, like what the considerations are, and also for full ID as well, right? So with all that said, let's get into the main part of the video. Firstly, let's talk about the mythic items. So for quite a while, Goredrinker has been kind of the standard Bruiser item a lot of Bruisers have been playing. However, in terms of Bruiser, champions, not many people have really been able to go this, and being that the meta has been shifted into an ADC kind of meta, or it was with the Rageblade changes that occurred, this pushed a lot of these Bruisers being a lot weaker because getting this item simply wouldn't cut it. Champions such as Vayne, Action, or you name it, Ashe, all these champions with Shred abilities will simply just turn that gold into nothing, making it a waste of a buy, and also making most champions that buy this very weak. Within this change of 13.10, they did also lower the cost by 100. They also reduced the combined cost as well by 100, of course, and they also increased the mythic passive by an extra 25. While it doesn't seem much, these made a big significant difference to what Renekton is right now. And coinciding with the buffs that he received, he's able to be so much more tankier. He's able to do so much with the item again as a Bruiser pick, and if he does get ahead within the early game, he's most certainly going to be an absolute monster in the mid game if you know how to pilot him. So this alone has been a very, very good purchase again for Renekton. And in the games where he's against a lot of melee champions, this makes Goredrinker a very strong choice if you want a frontline for your team or be able to dive the backline and create a distraction. That's more so when you want to go Goredrinker in a game. Now, there are many other item choices as well for this. However, I think that it's the most safest buy because you're getting 55 AD, 300 health, 20 ability haste, 8% Omnivamp. You're getting health and ability haste from the Mythic passive. A lot of this just helps Renekton's stats come into the game. Renekton excels with every one of these stats and makes him a really strong champion if you are ahead. However, if you do fall behind with this item, it can feel very awkward to kind of get your footing in the game, but as long as you have some stats that coincide with your kit, it should not really make the biggest difference, and it also does make it still a safe buy regardless. So now that we've talked about Goredrinker, let's move on to Eclipse, currently one of my favourite items within the game. So if you guys have known me for quite a long time, you knew originally that I hated Eclipse. I hated the way it worked because right when they first added it within the game on the PvE, it was absolutely strong and it was ultimately a dream item for full AD. It had something like 8% target maximum health damage, or maybe it was 12 actually on the beginning, and you do insane one-shots like in the clip that you're currently seeing right now. The item was just absolutely ridiculous, but since then, Riot toned it down quite a lot, to a point where it wasn't really synergizing with Renekton, coinciding with Prowler's Claw, which had a dash, and it also amped all your ability damage, which would lead to immense damage. But now that Prowler's Claw is gone, full AD has taken quite a dip in the people playing it. You don't really see many people go it. However, it is mainly because people don't know what to do with it. Now, if you were playing full AD Renekton before Season 11, you knew that Ghostblade was a core item for your full AD playstyle. You would often roam with it. You would go all these items like Ravenous, Cleaver, Bork. You would do all these insane one-shots and you'd have such a mixed great stat value that you weren't really ever squishy and you was always strong and very flexible to the situation given to you. While that still can be a thing, it is definitely a lot harder these days with the increase in mobility in the game and champions being a lot tankier. However, I think now with Eclipse also being changed to where it's proccing on 6 seconds instead of 8, and giving you quite a bit of ability haste, it actually makes the item very good. And Riot have buffed it in various different areas. For example, it now builds from a Warhammer compared to before where it was Longsword and Vamp Scepter. These components before wasn't really helping Renekton a lot because he wanted either the CDR or if he was going to go a similar path, he would simply go Blair Rune King. And you had to get these components right away, otherwise it would be a lot harder to get if the game started going downhill. But now that this item easily builds from longswords, it makes it incredibly easier to build it into a lot of different matchups. Matchups such as like a Ornn, Shen, your tanky Bruiser style matchups where you want to do quick trades. This item remains a really strong choice. And in fact, it even creates unfair trading patterns where enemies can't even trade with you if you're ahead. You can simply do trades under tower, you tank the tower shots with the shield or the enemy's incoming damage, and you can just quickly dip out with the moon speed, which also affects your E moon speed, making it really unfair, and there's really no counterplay option for the early side of the game when you complete this. Then you carry over within the game, and this damage, combined with a Blade of the Rune King and other various items, will make you insanely strong, and it will give you immense burst power. While it's not the same as Prowler's Claw, it is still insane, and you're basically one-shotting whoever you're going to play against if you combo properly. So don't worry my full AD Renekton mains, you guys still have an amazing item here that I highly recommend. At first, I was kind of playing it wrong myself. I was often playing it like a split push item, but as soon as you stop taking that mindset to the item and you're just playing it normally, this item will remain very strong, and as soon as you like pair it with an Ingenious Hunter in Domination runes, or even just with other items like a Sojin, Cleaver, items that give you a lot of cooldown reduction, this build just remains insanely strong and no one can really duel with you with the damage you're dealing, on top of all the other stat values you're getting from this item. The next item that I do want to talk about, and a good counterpart to the full AD playstyle, is Youmuu's Ghostblade. Unfortunately for me, when Youmuu's Ghostblade did get changed initially, I wasn't there to play it. I actually missed out. I played probably a 1 game max, and on that game, I knew how broken this really was. And it's such a shame I didn't get to play more of it. However, I knew it wasn't going to last, and long and behold, it did get nerfed, and now Ghostblade has kind of fell off a little bit. It still remains a pretty strong option. When you compare damage and stuff like that, Ghostblade does a similar amount of damage. However, it might do a little bit more against squishy champions, which is basically what it's designed for. However, you do lose some defensive values like Eclipse gives you, and also even dueling power, as in that with Eclipse you have a cooldown to play off of, you can kind of time it properly with your rest of your trade. Ghostblade requires you to build up the stacks beforehand with the Dead Man's Plate-like passive. So in order to one-shot someone, you want to make sure this is charged and then go in onto your target, which will give you a value of lethality, helping you to one-shot a target. Now, if you don't one-shot them with the lethality you're given and the stats, it remains incredibly hard to win the fight, as a lot of Bruiser-style champions or even tankier targets will end up potentially killing you, and then also shutting down that gold that you bought into this item. So really, when we think of this item, we want to play this item as like a roaming and hardcore squishy burst assassin build. So we want to get a Ghostblade, maybe Cleaver or Bork, roam the map, we want to go bot lane, just destroy whoever we can that's squishy. Always be proactive, playing off red trinkets. We always want to be like looking for flanks, looking for assassin-like players. That's the whole idea of this item. Once you master this item is going to incredibly carry you within the games. Renekton's goal isn't to 1v9 carry like a Katarina or a Master Yi. Your goal is simply to get ahead, enable your teammates in the game, spread the gold lead, help them, and assassinate the enemy opposition that is also strong, as in ADCs or mid laners. Once they're out of the game, your team is able to play the game and also have a lot more success in being able to win the game. So when you compare both of these playstyles, like Eclipse and Ghostblade, I'd personally say that you go the Ghostblade when you want to roam and impact the game early against a comp that is going to scale. The more tools you have to end the game early and also use your lead to your advantage, Ghostblade is going to be insane for that. If you're able to macro to every objective, you're able to group to every team fight, or think where the enemy is going to be walking using your jungle, if it's like tracking the jungler or tracking where people are going to be rotating towards a certain time, this item remains insanely strong just for that. However, while it's not so strong against bruisers or tanks, Eclipse fulfills that spot within the game, allowing you to take on any targets within the side lane. You're able to have a lot of shields to play around with, giving you a lot of self-peel within team fights. Pair this with Eclipse Black Cleaver, maybe Sterix or Sojourn, something that gives health or moon speed or some defensive options. This remains a really strong item and gives you a good mixture of stats as well. So all in all, I think if you're going to play a full AD build, play both of them. Play depending on the scenario. If you're against someone that's a bit tanky, or like someone that like you want to just tower dive and like kind of keep abusing within side lane, or wanting to 1v2 or 3 potentially, Eclipse is by far better than Ghostblade for that. But if you want to roam, impact the map, play off every objective, Ghostblade will fulfill that spot. The next item we now have is Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker, just like Eclipse and Ghostblade, is the flex equivalent to Goredrinker. Depending on the matchup or the game itself, we can simply go Stridebreaker to allow us to slow enemies and also help us against champions that have low mobility, allowing for our teammates to pick them off as well as ourselves. So the core main differences to when you go a Stridebreaker over Goredrinker is when the enemy has champions where you need to lock them down. Perhaps you're top lane and you're playing against a ranged matchup. Having the slow 2 will cripple the enemy from being able to get away from you, allowing you to apply consistent DPS as you're able to land on top of them. It also remains a great option too to allow your teammates to catch people, whether it's your jungler trying to gank your lane and you have the item active ready, or perhaps you're in a team fight, you dive from behind and you use the Stridebreaker active to slow everybody, allowing your teammates to jump into the fight and allow you to shut down the enemies. So already, when we think of it from a macro perspective, we can kind of think of a lot of ways to actually utilize a Stridebreaker. But is it actually better than Goredrinker? That's the main question we have here, as well as a lot of other people. Now, it really depends on how you play it, right? Because Goredrinker by itself is pretty good all around. Like, it's really good for your bruiser stats with you having higher health pool, you have a fair amount of AD, you have a healing active, and the more people you hit, the more people you'll heal from. You have ability haste too, which Renekton likes, especially with his new build, Ability Max, which I will talk about in a separate video. Like, there's a lot of things we can do with the Goredrinker that will help us game to game. However, Goredrinker is definitely really weak when you're against shred teams or teams where you simply get picked apart and you're not mobile enough to catch them. That's where we substitute the Goredrinker for Stridebreaker instead. The main differences compared to Goredrinker and Stridebreaker is that Stridebreaker has no Omnivamp, it has 20% attack speed, which Goredrinker doesn't have, it has 5 more AD, they both have similar health, unless you look at the Mythic passive. But when you also compare the Mythic passives, you get moon speed from Stridebreaker, and you also get health and ability haste from Goredrinker. So essentially, the way we compare both of these items is that if we're against like your ranged champs or in a game where we need to slow, Stridebreaker is obviously for you. Now, if you want to go an item to frontline, tank, and just go dive the backline and buy time for your teammates, Goredrinker is a better option for that. Essentially, I don't think there's really a better item here. It just simply depends like how you prefer to play, right? Some people like the attack speed and fluidity of Stridebreaker. Others like the beefiness and frontline power of Goredrinker. So ultimately, it kind of depends on you how you prefer to play it. But I do recommend to at least play both of them like within your game, because both of them are going to open to a lot of options and give you a lot more variety in how you're able to carry a game. Now, the next items I do want to talk about are tank mythics. Tank mythics are definitely a bit more underrated, I feel like, right now. Before, I was quite an advocate of tank mythics such as Sunfire Cape and Frostfire Gauntlet. These items were really good choices back then, but now that they're shifted into normal items, that remains us with Jak'sho and Evenshroud. Now, we can see there's quite a big difference in the price costs here for items. Now, let me explain, though, why you'd probably ever want to go Evenshroud. So the way Evenshroud works is that if you immobilize someone, being that it's from a stun, which Renekton has, you're able to do a percentage amount of damage that your team can benefit from. Evenshroud allows your teammates to do 10% extra damage. Now, you pair this with a press the attack as well. That's up to 12% extra bonus damage on the rune alone. Combine both of them, that's 22% extra bonus damage on top of a target. Now this, with an ADC character or even some other character that can lower stats or provide debuffs, this is actually insane for damage comps. In a game where your team is potentially behind or you want your backline to do extra damage to win the game, Evenshroud is a perfect option for that. Now, you only go Evenshroud if you go Bork first, but once you get that item, your team is going to do insane damage, or you could even go Black Cleaver, to be honest. I haven't really explored that option much myself, but I feel like if you are playing for your teammates to spike up, like if you have a Vayne or Draven, some kind of ADC character that does a lot of damage, Evenshroud is kind of a no-brainer if you want to get those easy wins, especially if they're already ahead as well. It's just going to simply mean that you're going to be able to allow your team to do more damage, therefore you have a higher chance of winning. Now, I think this item is more of a high elo choice than low elo, simply due to the fact that if you build this in low elo, you probably can't actually utilize your teammates in a positive way. Kind of same thing with Goredrinker in a way too. I feel like Goredrinker is also more of a high elo option, just due to the fact that the way you play it and the way that you approach fights is a lot more different to other items. So all in all, I think Evenshroud is definitely a better choice if you're high elo or you simply want to play it off your teammates. So again, that's why I don't really entirely recommend it to everyone, but if you're someone that wants to try something out and you're behind, Bork into Evenshroud or Cleaver into Evenshroud is probably the best items you could probably do for that scenario. So any scenario you're like behind and you just want to help your teammates in a way, I highly recommend this as an iron option. Jak'sho is also another option that I can recommend for people game to game. However, I think since the nerfs and the way the item has changed, I don't think it's really the strongest option anymore. Now, I know some people like RTO like to play this item. So people that do like the whole drain tank type of build where you have like a Jak'sho, Ravenous, maybe a Spirit Visage on top of that, especially with the buffs. Perhaps it could make a pretty strong style for that. But I don't think Renekton is also built that way to be played in that manner. I think he's not really strong enough with his abilities to kind of consider this playstyle long term. And I think at most, the way you play Evenshroud, I think you'd build Evenshroud into a game where enemies lack Grievous Wounds, they also lack Armor Shred, so that would allow you to jump into the fights, just completely drain tank everything, and the enemies won't be able to handle you. I think that's the only case that is probably good, but even then, this item could quickly get countered by other items afterwards. So, I'm not really sure myself. I'm not really the biggest fan of this item, but I just thought that maybe I'd throw it out there because maybe you guys would like that. And for a tank mythic, the stats aren't so bad. 400 health, 30 armor, 30 magic resist, and 20 ability haste. It's all pretty good, and you get more armor and magic resist the more items you have, and you drain people's health around you. So it's all pretty good, actually, I think. But ultimately, you're not going to build this first either. You're going to build it after Bork, and there are other options instead you can do for that, like Bork into Eclipse or Bork Ghostblade, Bork Evenshroud, like. You know, I think that's kind of like the whole way you would kind of go into these mythics. Now, with Goredrinker and Stridebreaker, however, I don't think Bork is really the best for them, but we're going to move on to that later within the video as well. So right now, that has been my mythic explanation, so let's talk about the suboptimal mythic choices that we do have. So let's begin with the third lethality choice being Duskblade. So Duskblade or Dratfar gives us 60 AD, 20 ability haste, 18 lethality. It also gives us from 0 to 20% ability damage based on the target's missing health. Now, you'd already think that this is pretty good, right? But the whole reason I do not like this at all is because the Mythic passive doesn't really fit Renekton. And I also feel like that the whole fact that you're not guaranteeing a one-shot of this item is also another big problem for it. Now, unless you're against a full squishy comp, I'm sure this could work, but why wouldn't Ghostblade work, and why wouldn't Eclipse work for that, right? These items also give Renekton a lot more versatility within the game, and lead to a lot more winning situations than a Duskblade gives you. Duskblade suffers from the fact that you would lack moon speed or mobility to get into the fights, you lack self-peel, apart from the whole invis part of the item. However, you can't guarantee that exactly, and if you're in a high reload game too, I feel like a champion with just a GA or like someone with like a Lulu or like any champion that can like peel for another champion, like it would just make the item not really work as well. Now you could also go Devil's Advocate and talk about Ghostblade for that, but at least Ghostblade, you're able to kind of use it for the mobility portion and also impact the map earlier. This item, you don't really get the same thing. You're kind of just playing for a team fight and looking for a one-shot. And I don't know, I just think what the item is, it just doesn't work as well. Like game to game, the games I've played this, I felt like I could do more with the other lethality items. And maybe I am a minority, but I have talked to people like 3-in-1 Warrior and some more people about this item too. And they all kind of agree with me that it's just not the most best option, and it's not the most consistent either. So with that said, I don't think this item really fits Renekton perfectly compared to the other options, but maybe you guys can make it work, because I certainly can't. But that's kind of like my whole thoughts on it. I don't think it's really led me to winning scenarios or felt as good as other items have. Now, the next two items I want to talk about at once is Triforce and Divine Sunderer. Both of these items share a Sheen proc, and Renekton historically has never felt good with a Sheen proc, due to the fact that his cooldowns can be pretty long, and the fact that you want to get all your abilities in all at once to one-shot someone. It doesn't really favour the whole idea of waiting for a Sheen proc. Like, for instance, right, if we comboed slowly, like auto Q, auto W, auto E, like we're going to get way more damage out of that if we play towards our Sheen procs. However, that does slow our DPS so massively. Now, if we compare it to just going like a typical full AD one-shot, we're getting all our damage off in like literally less than 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds, providing zero counterplay for the enemy, but also allowing us to have all that damage ready with another build. Now, if we only had a Sheen item in that, we're losing so much additional damage that it doesn't really make the item worth. Renekton's whole idea is to be an ability caster that one-shots, and going in these items don't really fulfill that playstyle. And when you consider that you could go a Sunderer for a tank matchup or a champion that like is pretty tanky overall, it still doesn't feel so good to play with. It feels very clunky. I feel like an Eclipse would do a lot better than that, or even like a Goredrinker. Like there's a lot more flexible options of how we can play the game with it. As long as we have an empowered E2, it's always going to help us against tanks or people that are stacking armor. So in comparison, I don't think going Sunderer is great here. And I think it's a lot better just simply to go Blade Rune King too, if you're looking for current health damage instead of max health damage. And that also outperforms Sunderer as well. So overall, I think Sunderer is kind of a miss completely. Triforce is definitely better than Sunderer, but I still don't think it's good enough. And I still think it's kind of like a miss of an item. So I don't really look at these as like consistent item choices. And it's pretty weak as well when it comes to like versatility within the game. Like looking at, I mean, the stats look good, right? But overall, the main problem is just that, like, it doesn't give us an active, and I don't see it really popping off as well as other items, too. Like, being that it has no actual, like, passive that, like, helps us, like, it gives us, like, to try not confuse you guys, like, it gives us, like, damage for dueling and stuff, but having, like, lethality or, like, an active that comes up every so many seconds, like Eclipse, that is ultimately a better choice, and I think just going Triforce is very gimmicky, and I don't really consider it as a serious option. So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on this. I don't really have much more else to say. It just doesn't feel good game to game, and I'm only going to tell you guys S tier builds and consistency, which is the best, and I don't think this is one of them. The next items I want to talk about are crit items as a whole. Crit as a stat on Renekton is pretty weak if you ask me. Renekton doesn't really have any abilities that work off crit outside of your W. Your W, however, only procs 1 crit hit, and aside from that, it's not really so much damage, and typically in a lot of other builds like Full AD, Eclipse, Ghostblade, you're often doing a lot more damage, and you have a lot more versatility of what you can build too. Every time you opt into a crit build, you're forced to keep going crit items, and a lot of the crit items don't really work on Renekton. The most you can kind of compromise for are probably like a Galeforce, Cleaver, Collector, LDR, Bloodthirster. But aside from that, I don't think this build is really that strong, and you kind of miss a lot of like other values in playing off a haste or some other other things like health, current health damage, or a Bork. Like, you miss out on a lot on that, and being that you're looking for damage, you're ended up losing out on damage because you can't get an item that you need. Now, I think the most consistent and probably the only viable playstyle for crit would be Galeforce. It still isn't good enough, and it still doesn't make up for the fact that we lost our dash item from Prowler's Claw. So, all in all, I think you just stay away from crit. It's probably fun to do if you want to go Galeforce every now and then. It's a fun build, but it's not good long term, and I think it's not going to give you the same results as other full AD options can with Eclipse and Ghostblade. I did also include Navori here, however, I don't think it really does so much. And I think it's also a bug too. I don't think the increased damage is also working on abilities, and not that it really can work on our abilities anyways. So overall, I think it's just kind of a miss, and I wouldn't really consider this option. And lastly, in our suboptimal mythic choices, I have Heartsteal here. The problem with Heartsteal is that this item you need to pick up right away, and if you pick up this right away, you're kind of griefing. All the build components do not favour Renekton whatsoever. You're missing out on damage, you're missing out on snowballing opportunities. You're also playing a build style that can easily be countered by champions such as Vayne, or champions that can use percentage damage like a Jax, or someone that just has Bork, Sunderer. So all this considered, I think it makes the item very weak, and also I think it's very just clunky overall to make work. Like, at most, you want to get Bork into Heartsteal, but that also doesn't work because you're missing out on the fact that you're not stacking it earlier enough. So you're missing out on the chances to scale with the item. So when you think of it more deeply, you're not really getting any good stats, or you're not really getting any favorable positions with this item. And at most, it's just a gimmick troll build item if you want to have fun with. So with all that said, these are mainly like the item choices that I recommend and that I don't recommend. I'd also recommend quickly a Radiant Virtue. I did forget this initially. This is also a very good substitute item if you want your teammates to heal within the fights while you're behind. Going Bork Radiant or Cleaver Radiant is very strong to keep your teammates alive, and also allow your teammates to kind of steamroll the game. So if you're behind and you want another item choice, I also recommend Radiant. I forgot to mention that originally, but yeah, it's a really solid item for that if you want another mythic choice. But aside from that, these are mainly like my main item choices and main thoughts and opinions. Now, the next thing I do want to move into before we go any further with the whole build is why not to build these items. Prowler's Claw, Prowler's Claw. Prowler's Claw remains a very weak choice nowadays because it no longer gives us a dash. The stat values are good, however, but you can't really fit it in a build. Your main build is Mythic, Cleaver, Bork, Shrelder, and maybe some situational item. Like, maybe not Shrelder, but you get like a situational item like Starix, Moore, Death Stance, GA. Like, there's too many items that you'd rather prioritize over. And game Prowler's Claw simply doesn't work unless you're smurfing and just want extra bit of damage. While it remains a good damage item, it just doesn't fit in our build, and we most likely do not need it either. So that's kind of like why I don't recommend to build this, because when you are building this, you're missing out on a chance to get an item that's going to help you with the game. And Prowler's Claw really isn't giving you that much. It's just like a greedy lethality item if you're ahead. Which you can go, but I don't recommend it. The next item I do not recommend, for obvious reasons, is Serpent's Fang. The amount of people that still tell me, why do I never go Serpent's Fang, is simply because I'm Renekton. I have Empowered W. My Empowered W gives me a shield break, right? So if I have a shield break, that simply means I don't need to go an item that lowers shields. You know? And being that Renekton's W also has been buffed to where it has a lower cooldown more often, that also means I can W more often, so I don't even need this item to begin with, and it's just a waste of a slot overall. Next, we have Axiom Arc. Axiom Arc, like, since the ultimate changes now, this also makes a redundant item, and while the stats look pretty nice on it, I think it's kind of, like, whatever overall. And I think this is also wrong, this tooltip, so just ignore it. It's from the 2v2 mode. But yeah, like, I don't see the point of Axiom. Your ult's coming up basically every fight these days now with the ult cooldown changes, so I would just completely miss this item. The next item that I don't recommend to build is Kraken Slayer, and while it's probably a good crit choice for like a fun build with a free, like, you know, on-hit passive and like the way it works with your W, it's just something that we don't really want. Like, it's good, it's like a good fun item, but it's not really strong enough to kind of withhold us within the game. And I think, like I already mentioned, Galeforce, Collector, Bloodthirster, blah blah blah, that build, I think it's already better than like kind of Kraken Slayer in it. But if you're looking for the most damage possible, I'm sure this could help with it, but I don't think it's really recommended. And yeah, I'm sorry that I'm like destroying your hopes of crit Renekton mains. Maybe one day it can work and do well. Maybe someone can prove me wrong. Maybe I try it too on an account, but ultimately I don't think it's really good. But we'll see what the future holds, and maybe I do that as a challenge. The next item we now have is Collector. Collector is again a fun item, but I think it's very whatever. Like the stats are pretty decent again for a crit build, but why do we care really about this? We're already one-shotting, we're already going to overkill. And I think this is just even more overkill, and it's just a waste of a slot purchase. So yeah, with all that said, I think that's basically it for all the items that don't really do much. So let's move on to the actual build portion of the video, and let me explain to you the whole theory of when to do these mythics and other components together. So let's begin on our first option, which is the Bruiser playstyle. Bruiser right now is probably by far the best way you can play Renekton for all the reasons I already gave. But to kind of reiterate, right now a lot of champions can't really deal with Renekton as a pick. He is too strong. He has a lot of cooldown options with his ult coming up more often in fights. His W max build as well also allows him to have more stuns up, which gives him a lot of damage, skirmishing opportunities, and also allowing a lot of team fight opportunities to arise in his favor as well. Overall, like, going this playstyle right now will just make you a complete god, and by win rate as well, it is by far the most strongest build as well. And typically, we start off our Bruiser builds with our mythic of choice. We go the Goredrinker if we're against champions that are melee and want a front line and dive the back line. While if we are against ranged champions or like comps where there's like a lack of mobility, I think Stridebreaker would be the better choice, allowing your teammates to make use of more of the active. Essentially, you just compare the situations of when you want to go either of them, and you just build towards that. Now, the first thing that we also want to consider with this whole playstyle as well is that Sterix Gauge is by far the best time you should get second. It's kind of a toss-up between Sterix and Black Cleaver. Now, again, if we're playing the whole frontline Bruiser playstyle, Sterix second is really great for that. If we're so far ahead and we just want to be a distraction, just be a menace in the team fights, Sterix second will completely carry the games. The games I get my Gore Sterix, I'm just completely a god that no one can touch. And being that our ultimate also synergizes with the additional health out of Sterix as well, it just makes us really unkillable. And by far, it is the most strongest option you can do right now. Now, if we're against tanks and we need to kind of play more towards peeling our teammates and shredding the tanks for ADCs to do more damage, Black Cleaver second is also a good option. Or even if you're just snowballing and you want damage, Black Cleaver is really good for that. It gives us a giant range of stats. 50 AD, 400 health, 30 haste. It gives us a card passive, which shreds armor up to 35% armor reduction too. Gives us moon speed as well. Like, overall, this item is a really insane snowball item for Bruiser champions. And Renekton is also one of those candidates. So depending on what build you go as well, I think more likely with Stridebreaker, you do want to get Cleaver second, or even Death Stance. It kind of depends if you're against AD, like ranged. You want to get Death Stance second for more self-peeling stats with the armor, the Ignore Pain passive. Like, overall, this makes you also unkillable. So on the screen, I'll have little, like, scenarios where you want to go certain items. Like, if you're against, like, again, if you're a frontline and you want to just be a god within the game and just be unkillable, Gore Sterix is great for that. Now, if you want to be strong, you want to snowball, go into Cleaver is great for that too. Or if you're against tanks as well, it's a really good option for that, allowing your teammates to do more damage. Or if you have an AD jungler as well, that's snowballing. Going the Black Cleaver for them is also a great option too. Now on the other side, if you're against an AD top laner and you just want like a slow and you want to be unkillable against them, Death Stance second is really great for that. Or if you're snowballing, Cleaver is also great for that too. Now I've talked about these main options. Essentially for your third item, you can kind of go anything that you really choose to. You can go a Death Stance then if you want to, or you can go the Black Cleaver if you haven't already, or Sterix. Like, you can kind of go any of these three items for your second and third items. If you want to just play for that mid game and just like try and close the game as fast as possible. Guardian Angel can also be great for that, giving you the revive passive. Having a Guardian's Angel too gives you a psychological advantage over your enemies as well, simply due to the fact that the enemy has to choose to either focus you, waste all their resources on you, which then allows your teammates to do more, or they completely ignore you because they know they can't kill you, allowing you to end up killing the rest of them. It really depends on like what you want to do, but it also remains a strong option. The enemies have to really be careful on how they play fights. And being that in a lot of low elo games, people don't know what to do, it's often leading into a big win scenario getting that GA, and even by stats as well, it's a really strong item. So I highly recommend it as well if you want a third item, or even a fourth item. Now all the rest of these options, I don't really have a point where I know where to build them, but it just depends on the game and how I feel. Now, an item that we see that I think is super strong and underrated is Gargoyle Stoneplate. If we look at Gargoyle, 60 armor, 60 magic resist, and 15 ability haste on top of a gigantic shield based on your health. This item is literally just god tier. Like, if you get this item and all the components for it, you're just going to be unkillable. And if you pair this with a Goredrinker Sterix into a Gargoyle, no one has any chance, and basically the game's over at that point. You are Exodia. This is literally the Exodia build if you want to just be ahead in the game. So if you can get this item, you're pretty much god tier. The only con about this item is that it can be a lot of gold, and getting that gold is very awkward in the wrong game. You can do this item also in a Stridebreaker build, but I highly recommend this more so in the Goredrinker build because it's just kind of like you're going for those unkillable Exodia type stats. So that's like the best point like you want to do it. Next we have Titanic. Titanic is more of a lesser valued item for me nowadays. I don't really see the whole spamming like AD health builds as good. Now, while Bruiser gives you a lot of that, I go more of a mixed stat type build that helps for team fighting. Titanic is more gimmicky in that the more health I do have, the more AD I'm going to have too. But it's also a big gold dump too, and I have to be really careful with the gold that I'm spending. So getting Titanic in most cases really isn't that great for me because it's not really adding me a stat or like a value that I kind of need compared to like all the other situational items. Like for instance, Kenpungi is giving me Grievous Wounds, it's giving me haste, AD. Like this for me would be even better option, right? But I'd only build it into comps where they have a lot of healing, and if I need it ASAP, I can get it too. It's also a bit cheaper as well. So it all kind of depends on like how you're prioritizing the game. Like when you play Bruiser, you don't play to get the same items, you play to get the stats that you need to win the game. Like that's why it's different every game, right? Like not every game you're gonna go Gargoyle, you're not gonna go Kenpunk, you're not even gonna go Death Stance. Like it completely depends on what you're given within the game, like to play against, and you simply build off that. You build for the game, and that's why you'll end up winning more on Renekton as a whole. A lot of low elo people too fall into the same habits of building the same items, and it's really not the best way of looking at the game because you're hindering yourself, you're hindering the way other items feel to you, you're hindering the way your knowledge works and being able to counter certain situations and be prepared for that game to game. So all in all, it really depends like what you're looking for as well. And speaking of items that I also don't really value, Ravenous Hydra is also one of them. This is the RTO item, you know. RTO likes to scale, he likes to geld his AD, like, you know, he likes to sit in side lane, farm up. Not really for me. I don't really recommend it. I think it's pretty overrated too. And since all the nerfs on this item too, I don't think it's really that great. Overall, I think you'd only build this with probably a Goredrinker. Maybe on full AD as well, potentially, if you want it as a last item. But that's the thing. For a last item, you don't really think of Ravenous Hydra either. You'd rather get it early, but you're also missing out on other items you can get to win the game. So in my opinion, it's kind of a miss for me. But it's also an option regardless, and you can do that if you like to. It still gives you a lot of AD and haste. Can be pretty good in the right games where enemies don't have that healing reduction to deal with you. Or the games you just want to snowball as a Bruiser, go with those offensive damage items. So with that said, I think Hydra is definitely a choice there. Next, we have Abyssal Mask. Abyssal Mask, since the recent changes, have now made this item a really good buy. Before, I always wanted to buy this item on Renekton, but it had the whole like Void staff passive where you'd get like health and magic, mana and stuff like that. I don't know how it exactly worked. I think it was off stunning people. It was nothing Renekton really cared about. However, now they've made it back to like Adaptive Helm was in the past, kinda, where you can reduce. Actually, I don't think Adaptive Helm was that, but like you could reduce like magic resist, and you also gain a lot of magic resist too, some health, 10 haste. Like for 2,400, this item remains king for that. Like these stats are insanely strong, by the way. So if you're against comps where like they have a lot of AP damage, and you have like maybe a mid laner that's like high AP damage or a jungler, this remains a really good option. In fact, it's probably the counterpart to Black Cleaver. So if you have like an Evelyn jungle or Elise, you could build this item even like third item or second item if you wanted to, if you're prioritizing playing off that champion. So I think that's like the only times you really want to build it. You want to build if the enemy has a lot of AP on their team, like as a magic resist item, or you want to build it for your teammates that are very high AP as well, and you want them to do more damage. Probably the best time to really buy it. So I did actually miss an item here as well. I meant to add Force of Nature as a Bruiser consideration. While this item is definitely not what it used to be with the percentage stacking passive removed for magic resist, and then having like 25% less magic damage being dealt to you. It's still pretty good overall. Like, if you're in a game where the enemies have a lot of AP and you want to just have that moon speed as well and just, like, be very healthy, it remains a good option for that too. And I actually play it a lot still as well. I think it's very good. It still gives me a lot of magic resist, moon speed, like, very offensive stats as well. Help me tank those AP threats. So I think it's still very good. I'd pick it up third item mainly, maybe fourth, depending on the game. But yeah, definitely consider it still. Between these two items, you kind of juxtapose it based on what you're against or what your intentions are. And yeah, that's really basically it to say about these items. Now, the next item, and probably to your surprise as an item choice, is Knight's Vow. Again, with the whole, like, cheap items where you're behind, I feel like Knight's Vow is a really good option in those games where you're struggling. I think having this item when you want to, like, peel for your teammates and you're behind is, like, a third or fourth item when you're just struggling for gold. This can be a very pivotal item as you're able to take damage from your teammates to yourself. And being that Renekton has a pretty high health pool with his ult too, it can allow for a lot of tanking options and ways to peel your teammates. So it remains a pretty good weak side option too, if you ask me. And it's definitely a consideration if you're looking for that cheap purchase in a game that's very hard to gain gold. The next consideration for more so the crit users that you're against is Randuin's Omen. Randuin's Omen is always a pretty good choice as there are a lot of crit ADCs right now that are also strong. Zyra is one of them, Ashe can be one of them too, Draven even. So once you get this item, you are lowering that crit damage drastically, and this can be a very big moment to help you within the games. Picking this up third item is also pretty good, or even if you're against like ranged champions top lane, having good of a slow can also be pretty big, and no one can even escape you, and you're just this walking mass despair for them. Like, they literally cannot escape you, and it's literally so hard for them to play the game. So ultimately, if you are trying to tank and you're just trying to like cater towards a certain damage source, this is also a very good option for that, and I highly recommend it too. Now, one of the options you can also go as well is an Anathema's Chains. I don't really recommend it as much on Renekton, but you can do that if you want to against some picks that are very awkward to play around, like maybe a Lowy or Jax. If you're a Bruiser and you just want to lower that damage dealt to you, or even like if you want to supply a little bit more extra CC with the duration going up from the item, this is definitely worth to get, and it also gives you a pretty good amount of health and ability haste, so another good reason to get it. And lastly, for an item choice as well, we have Form Mail. Form Mail, you know, we know what Form Mail does. Armor, health item, pretty good against the damage dealers that also heal, of course. So yeah, you can typically pick this up third, fourth item if you need the stats. Maybe even last if you want to. So yeah, that's basically it for Bruiser items. There's quite a lot of them. But yeah, ultimately, the whole ideal way you play Bruiser playstyles is that you simply play for the game. You simply do what is required from yourself. You build the stats that you need to carry. And if you do it just right, you're going to actually carry a lot of games. And you're going to find out that Bruiser is also a very strong playstyle within the right hands. So now that I've covered the Bruiser section of items, it is now time to talk about the full ID playstyle. So we already went into that Eclipse and Ghostblade are already solid choices for full ID Renekton, and now I'm going to explain to you the build path and also when we go either of these items. So as you can see here, in both sections of the full ID categories, we have Eclipse, Bork, and we have a Ghostblade. Now, obviously, these depend as well game to game when you go either of these items, first or second, and that's what I want to explain quickly. I feel like Blair Rune King is definitely the most consistent option you can go, due to the fact that the 12% current health damage is a very big game changer that allows you to play into Bruiser matchups, tank matchups, and even squishy matchups. This item is just so good in Renekton because the way it works in your W. Blair Rune King procs 3 times on your W, meaning that it just does immense damage and no one can really fight you if you're 1v1. However, the whole problem that Bork has over the other items is the fact that the components are so weird to where you're not always going to get them. Like, getting a Vamp Scepter isn't always worth to get, and sometimes you don't have gold on the pickaxe buy, and the Recurve Bolt also seems a little bit meh at times, and since the changes too, it feels a lot worse kind of buying these days. And when you get into those Bork components, it doesn't really feel as strong, especially if you're snowballing. However, when we look at Eclipse and Ghostblade, their build path is actually a lot better due to the fact that it all builds into longswords, which means it's a lot easier to buy an item every back, like a component that does give us value. So when you look at both of these items, we can already see that the Eclipse and Ghostblade offer a better build path towards Renekton, especially being able to stack on a lot of AD, which works for all our abilities. However, when we compare item spikes, Blair Rune King is always going to be a lot stronger and more consistent for damage, but it doesn't also give us a healthy laning phase, as the item does give us very squishy components, we're unable to defend ourselves against certain champions that will still outtrade us till we get the item. Things like Shen and Jax, it can feel very awkward to rush. So when we compare both of them, like, I would say Bork is definitely a lot better into the matchups where they have low threat to kill you with these item components. If they do, and you don't desperately need the Bork, you can just go Eclipse instead, which gives you a way better dueling potential, and it's also a lot safer. Matchups like Shen, Ornn, tanks of these natures, I feel like going Eclipse first is a lot better because the shield can help us, we can bully these champions on the tower, and their training patterns also don't affect us when it comes to the whole 1v1 section of the battles. In comparison with Bork, where we can easily make a mistake still, we can easily lose a lot of health, and it can still be punishing and very risky to buy the item. So when we have these considerations into effect, it's very easy to like kind of tell when we go either or the other. Right now on the screen, I will also have a tier list on when to go either of these items. Hopefully this helps you guys. Now you might also be wondering, what about Ghostblade? Why haven't I mentioned Ghostblade here? I definitely think Ghostblade is one of the lesser needed items in the laning phase, because I feel like the whole item spikes between the midsection of the game or just before the midsection. If we're getting a matchup where we're already snowballing with Blair Ruin King, we then can just go the Ghostblade, which can help us ram out the lane. We also don't need to exactly fight 1v1. We're still going to have a lot of damage for the 1v1, but it's also not as fully consistent, because if we can't one-shot with the Ghostblade lethality passive, then we're going to lose out a lot of damage, and we're also going to lose out probably on the fight itself. That's when we need to also consider what our intentions are for the game. If we're planning to make an impact and try to get to all the dragons and play off bot side, getting that Ghostblade second is very vital for that, because of those stages in the game, you can play a red trinket, roam around, and basically dominate the map. Now, if we are going to be staying lane a little bit longer, and we're looking for more skirmishes topside, and playing off 1v2s or 2v2s, anything of that nature, or even team fights, it's still good, right? It's just like whatever you really prefer. For me, myself, I like Eclipse more often. But if I feel like the enemy has a lot of mobility and I want to catch them and also keep up with them, I think that Ghostblade's a good option. Or in a game where I definitely need to end earlier on, I would also lean towards that. So basically, again, just to reiterate and conclude this section, you should definitely get a Ghostblade when you're really ahead, you're against a matchup that you can easily steamroll, and then you can just roam the map. Or maybe you're against like a ranged champion too and you want to go full AD. Ghostblade is a very good alternative for that, and you can instantly one-shot them and the enemy won't be able to kite you or really be able to deal with you. However, if you're against a Bruiser matchup or someone that can give the fight back to you and that are very risky and can snowball against you, I think Eclipse as a damage option is actually very good. It's very safe. The enemy can't really trade with Renekton's training patterns with this item, and I think it's a very devastating item too in the 1v1s as well. However, if the enemy has no threat, and they're very hard to kill, and perhaps you want to have more consistent damage in being able to deal with everybody, Blair Ruin King remains a very solid and god tier option when it comes to that. You just have to play it a lot better with your health pool, and also be very considerative to whether it's good or not for the game itself. Now that we've covered the core items towards the full AD playstyles, it is now time to talk about the full AD considerations. So here we have a mixed range of AD items, and we also have some defensive items, and I want to get into why I chose these for this build very shortly. But first of all, let's talk about the first item that I think is very underrated, and also an item I've gave a lot of criticism to, and that is Spear of Sojourn. So, before when I talked about Spear of Sojourn, I actually despised it a lot, because I felt like it was a bit overkill, and for the time of when you buy this item, it didn't really have a space in a build to really purchase it. And while I still feel like it's hard to always itemize this, I do find myself, when I'm not going Blair the Ruin King, getting a Sojourn can be still very big. Like, a build that I like with Sojourn right now is Eclipse Cleaver Sojourn. I get so much haste, I have so much like W usage, like I can just spam my abilities, and if I am low, I get a lot of moon speed and people can't run away from me. So if I want to have a game where I don't want to go Bork and I already feel like I'm strong and tanky enough to like deal with people and not have to worry about health stacking, I think going the Sojourn option third is very huge. And with the item cost reduction by 3,400 to 3,300, and I think it had like a bit of extra AD on top of that, this item remains really strong. And obviously when you try to stack a lot of AD within this build, you're going to be getting more moon speed, you're going to be also getting more cooldown reduction on your abilities, which leads up to like 3-second Ws, and then like every combo rotation you have W back. So it's literally like old Sojourn in a way, and it's very strong in the games where you need those cooldowns and you want to be dealing as much damage as possible as well on top of that. I also do like going Blair Ruin King Eclipse into Sojourn. I think that is also very strong. Now if the enemy has no tanks, people stacking armor, I would 100% recommend you to buy this at that point. But if you're against tanks and stuff like that, I think going the cleaver still would be a lot better. And it also just depends, like, do you really want to spend your gold on this? Like, it's a very expensive option amongst the items, but if you do get this item, it can provide a lot of stats that could help you towards ending the game, and also it could also be a very strong duelist item as well. So any matchup where you like find yourself in long duels against squishy champions like a Riven, Fiora, maybe an Irelia, these items can help out a lot against those, as they won't be able to really deal with the Renekton's W coming up way faster than their own stun abilities. So it's a very big game changer amongst these choices. So overall, I think Sojourn is definitely very good if the enemy does lack a lot of armor, and if you want to get that moon speed. But if they do have armor, however, I do recommend getting the Black Cleaver instead, which is what I will be talking about now. So Black Cleaver is a very great item, and I've already mentioned this a lot of times, but the reason it's so good on Renekton is due to all the stats that it provides us. It gives us 50 AD, 400 health, 30 ability haste. It gives us a card passive that stacks 6 times, meaning 35% armor reduction. We also have a rage passive, which allows us to stick onto targets, and it also costs 3,100 gold. And if you factor all these stats together, and the cost itself, it's such an insane gold efficient item, and very gold effective as well. Game to game, you can perma build this, and it'll always be doing great for the champion. Now, in some games where I am going the Eclipse, I will typically just go either Eclipse into Cleaver, and usually go into Sojourn, then other situational based items. If I do feel like the enemy lacks armor and I'm not really against a tank matchup, I'll delay the Black Cleaver option third item, because I just think it's too good not to get most games. So most typically, you'll probably see me go Bork, Mythic into Cleaver, or at least 4th item as well. I'll build it around then, if I have a Sojourn instead. That's typically when I'm building it, also, and there's not really much else to say about it. The next item we have is Death Stance. Death Stance I'm getting as a 4th item typically, or 5th item. It depends on the game. If the enemy has a lot of AD champions, I'll typically get the Death Stance as an option against them. It is super good into your duelist champions, champions that burst you. Champions that have a lot of consistent damage, it is very good against, as you deny a percentage of their damage and it turns into a bleed. And if we do kill them before the bleed takes longer effect on us, we'll end up getting all our health back and completely deny all the effects of the damage they dealt to us. So overall, it's a very solid item into those AD duelists. Think of your Fioras, Rivens, even Jaxes, potentially. Like, it's a very good and solid item against those. And typically, I'm not really building it so much, but it's more so just, again, for the AD duelist comps or very AD heavy comps, which is when I'll build it. Next, we have Guardian's Angel. This is an item that I would like to go on a Ghostblade type of build, or even Eclipse really. It really depends, right? So if I need to end the game and I'm playing towards the mid game more so, and I want to pick up a stopwatch and then go GA where it gives me a psychological advantage over my enemies, like I would typically get it around 3rd item maybe. So potentially Bork Ghostblade GA is very good, or after the Cleaver. So let's say Bork Ghostblade Cleaver GA, or maybe Bork Eclipse, Cleaver GA. Like, it really depends on the game. Like, if I need an extra way to live, to do all the damage that I need to do, and then have this as a surviving tool, that's typically when I'll probably build it. So it really depends on the game when I'm building this, but if it's those close games where I need that advantage to stick out in fights, I'll definitely grab this 100%. Next we have Sherelda's Grudge. This is a very offensive AD option in the games where I'm super fed and I feel like the enemy has no threat and the enemy only has stacking armor against me. I feel like Sherelda's Grudge is a great 4th item. So I go Bork Mythic, Cleaver into Sherelda, and then I'm just completely unstoppable. I melt anyone that comes in front of me. With these items, you basically can fight anybody in the game. No one can really deal with you whatsoever. They can't escape you with the slow, the max armor pen you're getting, the AD and ability haste. Like, this item makes you completely unstoppable. So if you feel like you don't need to prioritize any additional items against the enemy comp, I think Sherelda's Grudge is a great purchase, and it will definitely give you the max damage you want possible. So if you want to play purely for full damage and burst, Sherelda's Grudge is typically for that option, and I highly recommend it when you want to snowball a game as a 4th item. You can even get it 3rd item with like a Bork Ghostblade Sherelda's, but the difference that Cleaver and Sherelda's makes if you compete the two of them is that Sherelda's is good for that instant burst if you want to just one-shot somebody without having to stack and stay in fights longer. However, you lose out on that survivability that the Black Cleaver gives you and the moon speed. Well, it doesn't really matter about the moon speed, but more so you just look at it as like the healthy survival option compared to Sherelda's Grudge. So if the enemy has less threat, Shrelder's Goods Third is also good. But if they have a little bit of threat and you want that health long-term within a fight, then Cleaver is obviously the answer for that too. Next item, and probably like my most unfavorable item, is Ravenous Hydra. Ever since all the nerfs and just with how the item is, I'm not really a big fan of it. I feel like that this item is very greedy. It is very good if you want to get it earlier on as a first item choice maybe, and then like you proxy and take all the enemy's jungle camps. I think for that specific scenario, Ravenous Hydra is very good, but it doesn't really give us snowballing stats to 1v1 or like carry over within a team fight, because most certainly enemies buy healing reduction or use an ignite on you. And then when you're jumping onto people with this item alone, it's not typically enough to really kill people. And it doesn't really give us any passives that really like help us within fights or skirmishes. Now we do get a bit of lifesteal and wave clear, but that's as far as it really goes. And it's more of like a laning farming item that we want to like just perma split push and take over enemies top side of camps. Or bot side if we're playing bot side with the item. And also I haven't really found it in my style to be effective. And I don't really see any positions that I'd really build it with these other items that I've already mentioned. Like at most, you could get it last item if you wanted, or like a 4th item. But again, at those points in the game, in like a high elo game, people are going to be running around with healing reduction. So typically that idea of like trying to get a healing item then isn't really worth it. And it's a lot better to get like a situational defensive item that is a lot better. Or if you're trying to play for max burst, I think even other items present a better choice, you know? Like, I don't really see Ravenous Hydra really fitting anywhere, but maybe if it works for your playstyle, you definitely can do that. I think this item's a lot better on Bruiser styles, personally, like with a Goredrinker. But again, I think it's basically down to how you play. And for me, I'm not really a big fan. But again, I'm just throwing it out here in case you guys want to try it. I think your best item choice is either 1st item or maybe 4th item onwards. Like, it really depends, but that's as far as I really think about the item, and we'll move on to the next item. An item that I didn't like, and I'm still trying to learn myself, is Hullbreaker. Now, Hullbreaker on paper is very broken, and when we look at the moon speed added onto this item now, it is super good, and 3,000 cost for this item, it's crazy. Like, we could build this first item with Conqueror and do a lot with it. But the problem is, it doesn't work the same way as it would on other champions, and it's completely like, you only would build this first item to completely dominate someone, like as a smurfing item. Like, you build this to stat check and then just completely play off your lane only, you know? But it's very greedy, and it's not really a very sustainable option when you're playing top lane. Like, again, I think I'd rather favor Ravenous Hydra than this item first. However, an actual item spot where we could play this is 3rd item. Now, a Renekton player with the name of Powder Snow, who's a Korean Renekton player that has often been rank 1 on that server, has been going Hullbreaker 3rd recently. He typically goes Bork, Ghostblade into Hullbreaker. And now, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell are they going Hullbreaker with a Ghostblade? Isn't that 2 completely different playstyles? Yes, it is. You go Ghostblade to roam and play off your teammates and flank, while Hullbreaker is more of a soloist item. But why do we build that? We build it because of all the stats, and when we are playing in side lane, having a Ghostblade on top of that also helps us push towers faster, it also helps us kill minions, and also gives us a lot of burst damage and also protection against enemy champions with the additional armor and magic resist. So it makes like a very good dueling item, and it also makes us a very strong side laner. So again, in the games where maybe we're like weak siding our team, and maybe we need to play more soloist and push for towers, it could be very good. However, against your champions like Fiora, Jax, Sion, anything that can really like deal with us in side lane and make it really hard to keep pushing, I don't really see the point building this item personally. But if the enemy lacks that defense against that playstyle, that's where Hullbreaker could be really good. So your ranged champions, your very squishy champions like a Riven, Yasuo, Yone, wherever it might be, right? Or Jace even. I think Hullbreaker 3rd could be very good, and you can permanently dive people. You have permanent side lane pressure. Enemies won't be able to deal with you. It'll be very hard for them to 1v1 you and survive against your dives. So I think when you consider that, it's very strong. And even when you're rotating to fights, having these additional stats, like the 60 AD, 400 health, and 5% moon speed, I think they're all also very good. So while it's definitely a different item choice, like to play around, it's definitely like has a place. It's just that I'm not really knowledgeable enough right now to tell you how to do it, and I do want to experiment this and make a follow-up video on it. So I'll definitely be doing that in the future and giving you guys a perspective on that as a build breakdown, which is going to be another series I want to get onto in the future after this video. So all in all, I think going either Ghostblade Bork into Hullbreaker is good, or you have Cleaver third, then Hullbreaker. That can be good, but you're also missing out the viability of side laning at those points. But if you're playing TP with this style, it can also provide more room to play it compared to an Ignite. Ignite, you don't really have the time to really play a side lane a lot in the mid to late game. You're often playing around your team and looking for positions with the opportunities you have without the TP. So with TP, I think it's only pretty good for that. Now, you could also say with Eclipse, this could be good. I have not tested it myself. But again, I don't really see it in my playstyle. I don't see it really working for me with that. And it would require a lot of testing. But I guess with Eclipse, it would look at like Eclipse, Cleaver, Hullbreaker, possibly. But we also lose out on Bork. So a common trend that we do see with these full AD items and stuff like that is that we go one and sacrifice another, right? That's why I also feel like your core builds are often Bork, Mythic, and then like situational items. Because if we do just go the same build every game, we're going to be missing out on strengths to win a game. And I think with Renekton, that's what it's all about. We want to make sure that we're getting spikes that are relevant towards the game, that give us a higher chance of winning, and also allow us to scale into the game. Like if we completely just like let's just say we go a complete glass cannon build that'll show on screen right now. If we do this build every game, we're going to miss out on opportunities to itemize against certain threats within a game, like crit damage with Miranda or like heavy AD with a maybe like a GA or like Gargoyle, or maybe the enemy has tanks so we're not building towards that, you know. We can then get a Cleaver, Shroud, or like maybe just Cleaver then sit on like defensive items to also help us in team fighting. Like, it all matters a lot, and I do want to make a video on that itself, because it's also a very important topic. But yeah, as long as you're itemizing properly, you can win every game possible with this champion. That is also something I want to preach, and I will preach towards the end. So again, I want to get that in your guys' head, that that is how you want to play the game too. The next item that we'll be looking at is Sterix Gauge. Now, for a lot of people, and even myself, I wouldn't really consider this option the best, unless you kind of change your build path. Meaning that if you do gain more health within your build, a Sterix 4th to 5th item is typically a very good choice, as it's able to give you enough damage mitigation against bursts, AD or AP champions. It overall makes a very solid item towards getting a Sterix buy. Although, if you are going to be playing this style regardless, I don't think it's the best getting a Sterix, but hey, maybe if you want to change your build and go like Eclipse, Cleaver, Bork, or let's say, yeah, Bork into Titanic Sterix, you gain like a lot of HP from this build. You can also sell boots for a Deadman's, or like some other moon speed based item with health. So typically it can remain an item, but if you are going to go this path, just be wary that you might not get the most out of the item. It's very specific if you do. Like getting that Titanic is very important in my opinion, alongside the Sterix, because it kind of goes hand in hand. The more health, the bigger shield that you have, the more damage you will have to in terms of the AD scaling out of Titanic. So all in all, it's a pretty decent item if you need to just be a little bit more tankier. But you do have to consider like if you're going to have enough stats to also support that with like maybe a Death Stance buy somewhere in there. Maybe you have to throw out a Blair Ruin King, possibly. So again, it really depends on your intentions of what you want to play with. Now, I leave it in the AD considerations because it is a good item, but you do need to build a bit differently. On the screen, I'm going to have different builds along the item and like when to build it. So hopefully this helps you guys, and maybe you guys will like that too. So with that said, that's mainly Sterix Gauge, and I guess to talk about the counterpart of the item, Mormal Mortius, that is also very good into burst AP champions, or just AP champions in general. It makes a very good, I would say, you can rush this item first, but I think it kind of hinders us in this type of playstyle. So typically you could sit on a Hexdrinker, then finish off the Mormal Mortius around 3rd to 4th item. At this stage in the game too, you're going to get way more value, as the more AD that you'll have, the more the shield will be. Coinciding with that too, you're also able to have more damage mitigation against a lot of the AP champions that are scaling. Typical champions like an Ahri, Lissandra, anything of that nature of a lot of AP damage, it's very good for. And if the enemy does have like quite a big comp of AP champions, like at least 3 or more, this is basically a no-brainer not to get. So whenever you are against these type of champions, it is very important to get this item, as it makes you pretty much unkillable based on the amount of AD that you have and the way that you also play. In my opinion, when you compare Sterix versus Mormal Mortius, I will always mainly lean towards the Mormal Mortius, just because it's a better lifeline item. It gives you way better stats, and for the role of an AD champion as well, like an AD assassin such as Renekton. Having that Omnivamp also helps us a lot, being able to sustain in the fight, on top of all the damage that we have with our ult, our AD damage, our items. it's pretty great and synergizes super well with the whole playstyle in comparison to Steric's Gauge. Now again, I throw it in there just because maybe you want to kind of shift your build into having more of an AD HP style, maybe with one off-tank item such as the Death Stance or GA. So in that situation, that's where Steric's could fit in, but most of the time, and most certainly, I'd probably go more towards the Mormal Mortius. Now the next item, and probably the only lethality item that I would mainly choose out of the bunch of lethality items I've already talked about, is Edge of Night. Edge of Night may have low lethality stats compared to most of the other choices. However, you don't really view this item for the lethality. Instead, you view it for the tankiness and the utility that it provides. Having 50 AD, 325 health are already pretty good stats on top of 10 lethality. You can't really complain, and with the price as well, it's pretty decent. And the next thing that makes it the main buy of the playstyle is the fact that we get a spell shield that allows us to block incoming abilities. Now, in those games where we need to reach the backline and avoid getting CC'd and then instantly killed right after, this item becomes very clutch in being able to do that. Things like Lulu or again Lissandra, any champion that can press R or polymorph you, stun you, completely does ruin your engage and your flash attempts on people. Edge of Night remains a really solid buy, and in those games where you need to shut down carries later on in the game as well, this is also a great turning point item to help you close out the game and remove the threat of the CC that you are going to be dealing with. Now, this item as well is a very high skill cap item. This is not an easy item to play, and I will throw it out there. A lot of people make the mistake of buying this item and then instantly getting hit straight away within a fight. This item requires really good positioning, so you need to plan out a fight, wait for the enemies to use certain abilities, and then you want to go in right after. If you simply just dash in with this item too, it is easily going to get procced, and then you're going to lose out on all the gold you just spent. So make sure you are playing with Flash, and you are trying to go for this play style where you're looking for Flash Ws on a very important carry on the enemy team. And once you achieve that, you're going to run into no problems, and you're going to have an easier time also making an impact as Renekton within these type of games. So with that said, Edge of Night is very good. Not my most bought purchase, but nevertheless, it's still a good consideration to have when you are playing full AD, and perhaps that maybe you like it instead. Maybe I need to play more games with it myself, but yeah, I think when you are going to go this item, it's definitely good after your main 3 items. So typically buy it after the Rune King or Cleaver if you're going to go like Mythic, Bork, Cleaver, whatever order, and then like build it 4th or 5th last item. It really depends. It really depends on the game and how you want to play. Now, the next 2 items that I do want to talk about aren't actually AD items. However, they do provide us with the combat stat movement speed. And as you guys know, movement speed is a really broken stat within this game. And if we're able to also build that, we're also able to have more opportunities to play our champion. Renekton is quite a strong champion at abusing movement speed too. His biggest problem has always been the fact that he can be kited, hence why we have playstyles such as Ghost that exist. So having an item that also helps us bypass this problem makes a pretty big deal. And the items in question that you can buy as well, which are also pretty good for Renekton, are typically Dead Man's Play and Force of Nature. The Dead Man's Play, while it doesn't have the best stat line out of tank items, it remains a very good aggressive buy as it provides you with a stacking passive and moon speed. On top of having a Ghostblade passive too, you're going to be zooming across the map. And having those mixture of stats with health and armor, as we can see right here, this typically can allow us to tank quite a fair amount of damage, have a fair amount of stat lines that allow us to 1v1, allows us to tank damage and peel. It's a very good pivot item, especially into the 4th item slot, even earlier if you want to, but personally I think just getting this as a 4th item is typically very good, because at these stages in the game we need anything we can get to be a little bit more tankier, and also allow us to reach the high mobility teams, or even maybe low mobility teams. Anything that has like some kind of stuns or things we need to dodge and like weave in to get in, having that additional moon speed is going to be a gigantic help towards us. Even without talking about the item's moon speed, the fact that we get additional AD that also scales off our AD now on the on-hit damage also makes for a pretty good extra damage boost. Now, it's not too big, but again, it's just a little consideration to have, and that you can buy if you want to play a defensive item that gives armor with also a little bit of offensive stats. So while it's not my most main buy of choice, it's still a pretty good option regardless that I do want to present with you guys. And on the flip side, we have Force of Nature here. Force of Nature is also a very good item due to the fact that it has really great stats against AP damage. Now, in comparison to Deadman's and Force of Nature is easily the better item in my opinion. Because we're getting 60 magic resist with 400 health, on top of it also being a little bit cheaper, it makes a very good solid item into the comps where we're going to have 3 or more AP champions. So whenever we're against AP top, jungle, mid, or even support, that's all like heavy burst or consistent damage, Force of Nature provides us a very good playstyle into being able to counter that. And the fact that we can get even more magic resist, stacking up to 10 stacks as well, is also a very good choice too. And even when we get those max stacks too, we also gain an additional moon speed as well, making us even more mobile within the fights, making us a complete nightmare against any AP champions that are within the game. While it isn't as good as it was before, it is still a very great item, and as long as you have your main core 3 items that I've already talked about, having a Force of Nature on top will basically finish out your build against these potential threats that the enemy has on their team. So overall, I think Force of Nature is a very good item. And one more item that I do want to also include, that is also a bit of a different item, I would say, is Fan Dancer. This is a good item to sell once you are like maxed out of your build. If the enemy does lack threats and you don't really want to go a defensive item, you can just go the Fan Dancer here and sell boots. The mixed stat line that we do get from the boots gives us even more moon speed, AD attack speed, crit, which also procs on one of our hits of W, giving us a little bit more of extra damage, potentially. It makes a very good last item finish as well. Now, I don't always get to do this, but in the games that I do get to do this, it usually makes a big difference, and I feel like the spread of stats as well helps a lot with the aggressive AD playstyle that full AD provides us with. So overall, these are my main full AD considerations, and now, this doesn't mean to say that you can't add on more items. At the end of the day, you can build anything you want as long as you have your core items. So even if I've talked about these considerations, right, I can talk about a Randuin's, I can talk about maybe a Spirit Visage, I can talk about these items, but overall, I don't think they're the best slots to get unless you are against those situational champions like full crit comps where Randuin's would be good. It doesn't really matter that we have to get these items. They're all considerations. That's something I tell you guys. Considerations are simply a meaning that we can go with this if we need to. And we want to always build what's best for the game. So now that I've talked about all the considerations on what you can buy as items, I do want to talk about the best items possible and why I think that. Now, I've already talked about each of these mythics and items specifically, but I want to tell you about the core combos that you can have with items. Now, going these items will give you a gigantic boost in win rate, and also a gigantic boost in just knowledge and how to actually play with these items specifically. So right now, we're going to break it down and talk into each category that I have on how to play these item combos. The first one that we do have here is the Goredrinker, Cleaver, and Sterix builds. Now, right now, as I'm making this, Renekton is currently god tier with these items. Renekton lacks the counter matchups to beat him. Most champions within the game also lack ways to shut down the Renekton, as he's way too tanky, as all these mixture of defensive and peel stats. So with all this in consideration, Renekton right now is super strong, and on top of all the buffs too that make him a lot more versatile, having low cooldowns with his W, more damage on his ult, lower cooldown on his E. All these additional utility options and damage also provide him with an even better time within the game currently. And each of these items also boost Renekton's power within the game. Once you get that Goredrinker, that allows Renekton to heal up in the fights. It provides extra damage, animation cancelling benefits, a lot of different stat lines that provide Renekton with the right stats that he needs to play the game, being that he's an AD caster. All these items provide insane stats overall. Goredrinker overall is a very solid buy and probably in the best state it's been in a while. Now, while we don't look at this item solely for the fact that it has an active, we look at it just for the stats. If you play with the intention like for the stats and plan the right way with this item, you can be an absolute menace with this item. Pair this build up with Conqueror 2, we're going to be absolutely god tier right now, and no one can simply stop us. And I haven't even talked about the second items yet. Your second item considerations could typically be Black Cleaver or Sterix Gauge. Now, this completely depends on game to game, but after the Goredrinker, you can go straight into Sterix, and while it is not the same as it used to be, the fact that you do get scaling AD, and the fact that you will be already strong in a higher level, you'll already get like a big amount of AD to help you play around with the item, and the fact that you get a big health shield at a point where no one can really contest that, it also makes you very strong into a skirmisher and a teamfighting champion. And within the points of the game where we fight for dragons, or play around Baron fights, or go for these flank opportunities or trying to peel our allies within the fights, it just makes a very solid item. Like, for every situation you can think of, having a Goredrinker Sterix will most likely be probably one of the best options you can get. Now, while this build is definitely a lot better into the melee champions, or simply comps where you're not really easy to get kited, it remains a really strong option as you can dive in, tank all the damage, and then have your teammates come behind you and also assist you with shooting enemies down and also helping you play front to back. So with all these items in consideration, it allows us to easily play team fights as we're able to dive the back line with this. We can peel for our front lines, we can play front to back, I can go from back to front. Like, there's a lot of versatility that these items can give me, meaning that there's a lot more win conditions I have, and it also provides me one of the most safest options that I can also get. AD and health, like I've already mentioned, are some of the best stats. Get cooldown reduction too, on top of having a black cleaver now. Gives us even more utility. We can sustain in the fights. We can have armor shred, a shield, like for peeling. Like, there's just so much that this build gives us. It's just absolutely crazy overall. And talking about the third option, Black Cleaver. Black Cleaver is a very solid item to comps that have a lot of tanks, or if we simply want to snowball, it makes a very good item. The stat line, as I said, very god tier, very gold effective item. All these stats in combination with the Goredrinker help us duel basically anybody if we're ahead with Conqueror. And if we're playing against any tanks, that also allows us to shred all the armor on top of an empowered E, having our teammates do damage to them. This build overall just provides so much. And then if you think it couldn't get any better, we can also pivot into items like an Abyssal Mask that can gain us more stat value, which can allow our teammates to do more damage from our AP classes of mages and assassins. Like, we can just add so much. I can keep adding items here. We can get a Randuin's too, to help us play against all the crit damage or AD champions. Like, there's so much versatility that I simply can have in this build that there really isn't anything that can contest this tier. Full Mal is also another one that we can add, and when we look at all these stats in game, it is also very insane. And quite typically, the only time this build is really being countered is most specifically the fact that the enemy drafts a lot of shred champions like a Vayne, Fiora, possibly later on in the game. Like, any champion like this, it definitely can fall off, but even then, you can still outplay the fights, you can still flash W these champions, or at least play accordingly to them and have a big impact within the game. So when talking about pros and cons for the build, I think the main pro of this build is the fact that we're very tanky. We have a lot of great stats within our build. We're able to be super versatile for the game as we're able to build towards our teammates. We're able to build independently. We can even have a Blair Rune King if we want to. But while it's not my favorite build to do, you can simply do that. Like, there's just a lot of ways where we can pivot into certain items. Another thing is that we have very high cooldown reduction, so we're able to make a lot of plays happen. We're able to have a lot more peel opportunities, aggressive opportunities. Overall, we just have a lot that we can do, and it's by far the most safe and easy to pilot build that we can possibly do on Renekton. The con is, however, is that if we do fall behind, it can still be very hard to achieve these items, as getting towards a Goredrinker or even a Sterix while we're weak-sided or just simply behind can be quite the nightmare. On top of that as well, playing against champions such as a Vayne or Fiora or anything with true damage or ways to simply shred you can also be a very big con for this build, especially if they're already ahead. Like, at most, if you're even or even ahead, you can kind of control and play Renekton viably, but if the enemy bot lane is way too ahead, it can always be a big struggle in trying to handle against them. Another thing too is that while you aren't playing to be a duelist or to fight 1v1 later on in the game, you are playing to be a mid-game monster, so make sure you also understand that with playing with this build. It is by far probably the most important tip you should know, is that you shouldn't treat this build as a dueling build, but just treat it as a skirmisher teamfighting build. And that's not also to say that you can't 1v1 people, but it entirely depends on the game and what you're against, to where if you want to build items towards that, or simply ignore that and play for your strengths within the game. So in conclusion, when talking about the Goredrinker build, I think basically in 70% of games, 50% of games, wherever it might be, right, that going this build, or even like most games, to be quite honest, you can just simply go this straight build and then just basically change things off game to game. And while that, I think it is still good that you can do that, I would definitely recommend the next options I'm going to present to you guys, because I think the more builds that you simply learn, the more that you're going to learn about the champion and also learn more ways to actually play the game. So with that said, let me lead into my other favorite build and definitely probably the most strongest full AD option right now, and that is Eclipse Bork. Eclipse Bork is basically one of the stronger options since Prowl has been removed, because the fact that Renekton can easily proc the Eclipse with his EQ, Auto Q, whatever it might be, able to get a shield, moon speed, all these things create really dirty and disgusting training patterns. The reason that I usually rush this item is simply because I can basically abuse that very well. If I rush this item first, I can basically fight whenever I want. I can fight under towers, I can take 0 damage, I can dive easily, I could 1v2. Like, this item gives really strong 1v2 power on a champion that's already good for that. And if I want to make my champion even stronger, I can also opt for the Bork after that, or even pivot into the Cleaver. As long as I have Bork and Eclipse, I will do the most damage that I possibly can do within the game. And being that Eclipse also scales through the game, the more items that I buy with the Armor Shred, we're going to be basically being able to deal with absolutely everyone. No one can itemize against Renekton with all the armor in the world or the health in the world, because my build simply counters that. Bork Eclipse, nothing can outstand his damage. Now, while there are champions that still can fight you and potentially win, you still have a chance to even beat those champions. The fact you get the shield on top of your already high health pool with your items and your ultimate, you're able to make a lot of outplay opportunities, and then when you go for that W with Eclipse, that Cleaver, Blair Rune King, you're absolutely nuking everyone in your path. So if you want to go a full AD build that simply has barely any room to lose in 1v1s, or even through the game where you flash W someone, no one's going to survive that damage. Like, that's basically my favorite build right now doing this. If you want to get all these items that are also versatile, that also give you that breath of fresh air that I think a full AD build is needed since Prowler's Claw, I highly recommend this. Now, again, there's also a few ways you can play this, right? You can either start the Blair Rune King into your tank matchups or low threat matchups where you can easily rush it, then go into your Eclipse. Or if there is a little bit of threat on the enemy's matchup, or potentially you just want to go a safer option so you don't fall behind, Eclipse is definitely way better for that. And then you can either build your Black Cleaver if you want another safe option, or you can rush into your Blair Rune King right after, and then carry around that nuclear power. No matter what you build first or second, as long as you build your Black Cleaver third or go even into Sojin, that's what's ultimately going to give you the most power. So most typically, I go with the Black Cleaver because obviously the Cleaver Shred is kind of the whole thematic of this build. Like, having all these armor pen items and health shred give you that insane combat dueling power that allows you to transfer into team fights or even dueling in the side lane. So having the Black Cleaver, all these stats makes us tanky, we have more cooldown reduction, and this is where the build starts getting even more disgusting. After this point, we can get a Shrelders if we want to have more pen, or we can build situationally by getting Death Stance as a counter-dueling option for our 1v1 matchups, such as like a Riven, Darius, Mordekaiser. Anything that's also good for dueling against us, this item is really good for. Or we simply can go GA, we can go Randuin's, we can go Force of Nature, Deadman's. I also like that after Black Cleaver. It kind of just depends, like, whatever you're really looking for in the game. But as long as you have these 3 items, that's always what matters the most. Now, the pros of this build is that this build carries high damage, of course. We have very low cooldowns too. And being that we also have to max a certain way. Another thing that's also good about this build is that we can do W max. So currently I'm doing 3-point Q into W max and then E. With this build, it is absolutely insane, and we can always have a lot of W's up coming up in fights. And being that we are running with a lower cooldown reduction early with the build, the way to bypass this weakness is that we simply just put points into it. And then we're able to have immense damage, we're able to abuse Blair Rune King, and just have all this like high damage and cooldown reduction, which is crazy. And then once we get onto the Cleaver 2, it's basically game over from there for anyone. So as long as you do this ability pattern too, it will definitely aid you with this build, and I highly recommend it if you were going to do that. Another pro that this has is that it can be very versatile. We don't need to keep building AD with this. We can start going tanky. We can also play team fights very well. The fact that we get shield and moon speed makes us very slippery. It provides us a lot of burst damage. Speaking about the moon speed and also the shield, we can also use this in lane for really disgusting training patterns. Also giving us a way easier time to snowball too on a playstyle and a champion that needs to do that. So overall, there's a lot of pros for this whole style of play. So overall, I think Renekton is just very strong with these pros in consideration. Now, however, the cons of this build are definitely that we are very squishy. We definitely require a lot of knowledge beforehand. We need to know all our animation cancel combos. We need to know how we play as an assassin, an AD champion, completely understand our limits. So you do need to do a lot of limit testing with this build. You definitely need to control how you're playing fights, how you're playing your cooldowns, your fury. Everything matters on this champion. Every mechanical thing on Renekton completely matters with this build, especially a build that is very glass cannon. So overall, we have to take this into high consideration if we are going to play this and main this build. Another con is that this is a very expensive build, and while it can be safe just rushing Eclipse to kind of bypass that, trying to buy the Blair Rune King is basically the hardest thing about this build, and if we can't get that, we are completely in a doomed spot. So we definitely need to make sure we're not making mistakes, and that we're always trying to stay ahead. I guess another con that you could also say within this playstyle, or simply the item builds, is that we do lack a lot of situational items compared to our other build. But that's kind of the trade-off you're really going for with these items. Like, you either go your Bruiser style to protect and play around your team more often, or you simply go the full AD to be more of a soloist, or trying to be that hero that you need in the game. Like, if you need to one-shot a target completely from the game, and also be this threat, and have this damage on your team that you're already lacking, then Eclipse Bork Cleaver is perfect for that. So overall, I highly recommend this build, and that's where I want to get onto my next build, which is kind of the slight opposite, but still in the full AD thematic. Now, moving on to our third build, the Ghostblade Bork Cleaver build. Now, just like the other full AD playstyle with Eclipse, you can also go Ghostblade, which I've been talking about through this guide so far, and I want to explore why this is also another alternative that could be better for you, and also better for your game planning when it comes to going either Eclipse or going Ghostblade. So the whole idea of Ghostblade is that you build this simply just to be a threat on the map. You build it in these matchups where you can easily obtain it. You think of your matchups like Riven, Yasuo, Yone, or any ranged squishy champion. Any champion that is really squishy and can be countered by having more movement speed, Ghostblade is perfect for that. And on top of that, you have insane burst damage every time you touch them, and you really do carry that touch of death at all times. So with the Ghostblade, once we have this item and we're like dominating laning phase, the whole idea is just literally roaming the map with a red trinket and just going for every play possible. Every play will be created by using Fog of War. We will try to use red trinket, hide, use control wards, wait for the perfect moments to go in, flank from either behind or from the sides. This whole build is about guerrilla warfare essentially. So this build simply isn't that easy to pilot just due to the fact that we have to use our brain, which I know can be very hard at times as a top lane or even Renekton player, or just let's just say a league player to broaden out the scale, right? But essentially, if you do start using that brain of yours and you try to like be very creative of how you're engaging fights and you're really looking out for the enemy's threats and like you're understanding how fights are playing out to like know when to go in, you're going to do very good with this build. Like the biggest problem that people do face with playing a Ghostblade type of build is that they don't know when to simply go in. And unlike Goredrinker, which is like the whole basis of how people play Renekton, which is to simply go in until like it works, it's very different compared to that because we need to wait for cooldowns. We need to play like an assassin, right? The only difference is Renekton is pretty much the most tankiest assassin there is because he has so much health while having so much damage. But he can kind of tank out some of these fights that an assassin normally wouldn't. That doesn't mean that he still shouldn't just go in with E and then just die instantly. Like if we wait for enemy stuns, like if we're playing against like a Syndra, Jinx, whatever it might be, we wait for the Syndra's knockback to go on cooldown. We wait for Jinx's traps like not to be placed in our direction. With that, we let the fight play out, wait for them to use their abilities, or we simply go on them if we think that they're not going to use them right away. And you can usually tell when a person will use an ability based on your own positioning and how they would play. If you put yourself in those shoes of the enemies and how they use abilities, that's where it'll become a lot easier to understand when they'll use their abilities, right? So with that concept being explained, when it comes to fighting Renekton and going for these things, this is why I'm talking about you have to use Fog of War, you have to use your red trinkets, try and get those perfect angles, right? And just have this foresight in how fights can go. And that's why these playstyles require a lot of limit testing too. Because as soon as you like start to figure out what you can and what you can't do, the easier this build becomes and the better you get on Renekton as well. So that being said, once we understand like how to use this as like a team fight item or a skirmishing item as well, our main win con with this item is simply just go into the weakest lane in the game, bot lane. If we go to bot lane with this item, we're literally just perma-killing all of them. And being that we're already going to be 3 to 4 levels ahead, depending on how fed we are, they simply won't be able to withstand our damage. And every time we kill these and get them off the map, that just simply means we can take jungle camps, we can take towers, pushing minion waves, prep for other fights, like dive mid. Like, there's so much you can do with all these things if you break it down. This is where this build really shines. Now, enough about talking about the Ghostblade itself. Let's talk about what else you build with it. Now, like Eclipse Bork and any other build, you can go Blair Rune King first in the matchups where you're against bruisers, tanks. It's a very good and offensive item against those. However, if you want to just go the Ghostblade, you can do. You will be a lot weaker against these high health and armor stackers. And being that the whole item is based off lethality, where we need to build up stacks as well, we want to make sure that every time we have that up, we want it. That simply doesn't work with Ghostblade against these tankier matchups. So that's where Bork comes in, which allows us to have that damage and those dueling stats to make us capable of fighting them and snowballing really hard against them. And that's why I would also recommend like to either build this first or second, depending on the game. Now, something you can do if you do fall behind is that you could just sit on Ghostblade or go Black Cleaver. Hell, you can even rush Black Cleaver, then maybe go Ghostblade or Bork. Don't really recommend this. Definitely a lower win rate approach to the build, essentially because you're already weak-sided and you're behind, and it's just best to go into another item instead. But if you are ahead, I just recommend like this ordering of either these two first. Then when it comes to third item, you can go Black Cleaver, or you can even go Hullbreaker, which we've already talked about briefly, as Powder Snow, a Korean Renekton player, was doing this quite a lot. In the matchups where he'd be playing more of a soloist, and like going around, you'd have the Hullbreaker stats to allow him to 1v1. He would go Cleaver, however, if the enemy had like a lot of tanky champs, or he wanted that extra cooldown reduction, which is the kind of the difference over the item. Do you prioritize having cooldown reduction and armor shred for dueling? If so, go Black Cleaver. If the enemy lacks those defensive capabilities of having a lot of armor, or simply being able to kind of deal with you in a 1v1 scenario, then Hullbreaker is really good for that too. And the whole idea of this build essentially is you're playing off this moon speed stacking with the Hullbreaker and Ghostblade. You're basically unkillable for these range champs because you gain so much stat value after Hullbreaker. And even it's not even just about split pushing with this item. It's literally just about like roaming and just being a beast with the item, right? Like you don't need to be with your team, but you can just be like going in the jungle, right? Or even going for those solo flanks behind like someone who's like pushing a lane out, and you'd kill them and they can't do anything to you. So it remains a very good item, definitely very good. So I guess like overall, you take this into squishy champs that can't fight you, and you want to stat check them. Or you go Cleaver against like tankier champs and you want to team fight more, have the armor shred, that utility factor for your AD teammates as well, or for yourself. This is kind of like the whole idea of like when you would go either of them as a third item. And then whatever you don't get, you can get fourth, and then you can go like, finish off with a GA or Death Stance, or an item depending on whatever's good for you in the game. So all in all, very strong build, very macro based as well. I do see Powder Snow also go Conqueror if you want to go Conqueror. I personally think PTA is a better alternative. However, again, if you're playing for stats and you want to stat check, Conqueror is definitely really good for that because it gives you power in those early matchups where you're not able to really abuse them normally with a PTA. Think of Gangplank or Jax. Conqueror remains a very solid option into those because the additional AD for your Q, or even just like staying in the fights and having that AD build up, it's very effective. So that being said, you can kind of go either rune. I recommend PTA Conqueror with this full AD variant. On Eclipse, sorry. But you can also go Conqueror if you want to. Again, it depends. I think PTA is a lot better. But if you want to go Ghostblade, you can also go either of them. But if you're playing for that laning and like lane domination type of playstyle with the Ghostblade, I would say Conqueror personally. But now that we've talked about the full AD variants of the build that I consider very good, let's talk about Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker may not be S tier, but it is still very high, and I'd probably rate it around A tier. Due to the fact that Bruiser right now is very strong, and the fact that Stridebreaker also is no Bruiser variant is also kind of coinciding with that, right? Like, it's still getting benefited because all the items and the way Renekton is with this item. Stridebreaker juxtaposing between Goredrinker is that it is a lot better against people that are very mobile, or simply you want to just dive and like ruin people's days, right? If you want to go in and lower everyone's moon speed around you, this item is perfect for that. It's a very good disrupting item. Any champion that needs to pop off and like try and reach you, Stridebreaker is really good for peeling them off. The slow is really good, just AoE all around you. So those diving opportunities are very good. It's a very aggressive item too with the attack speed, allowing you to have a lot of 1v1 power as well within the fights. Like, most typically, this item is just really good all around. And it's a very different... While it's like similar to Goredrinker, it is a little bit different with the feel, and it can usually feel a lot more fluid and a lot more better to play with as well. And even for me, if I need like a mental reset on an item and I want to go something like a bit fun while having like similar stats to Goredrinker, I would just go the Stridebreaker personally, and I always feel like it does pretty well for me. However, if we do have to consider a con with this whole playstyle too, it is the fact that perhaps maybe that it isn't giving us that extra second win that Goredrinker gives. in those fights where the enemy has Shred or like some kind of champions that do high burst damage, having that Goredrinker active can change the world of a difference if you do get it off on multiple people in a mid to late game team fight. Stridebreaker won't give that, however, but you're also playing a lot more different. You're playing more to like reach the backline with your moon speed, trying to get flank opportunities. While you can peel with this item, I don't think it's exactly designed for that, personally. Like, you want to play like in between your teammates, like in the mid like section, like whether it's like trying to stop people jumping on your carries, like enemy frontliners, or trying to like stop the backliners from being from them attacking your teammates. You kind of just play it like that, really. And I know Renekton's very flexible with his role, and he can kind of play either way. But there is definitely a difference with that. And I would more so consider going this whole playstyle itself when you're against like very like mobile champs or like range champions. Like, I think to simplify it, just range champions overall. While Godrekton is definitely better against melee. And you'll definitely have an easier time as well, I feel like, with the Stridebreaker in those situations. Because if you could slow people, that means everyone can reach them. And that's basically the whole idea of this playstyle. Next, though, when we're talking about these items too, we have a Sterex gauge. Again, it's very thematic with the Bruiser playstyle right now. It is very good. You can also get the Black Cleaver like we talked about. I think the whole item theory of this and Goredrinker doesn't really change. Essentially, the main difference is if the enemy has burst and you want to stat check and be a raid boss, then get Sterex, right? But if the enemy has, you know, tanks, or like you need a way for your carries to kind of like gain the game as well, and you want to amplify their own damage, I think going a Black Cleaver is definitely really good for that as well, while giving you snowballing stats. So overall, it really depends on like your playstyle. And when it comes to third items or fourth items even, against high AD, and especially these range matchups, or like, let's say like you against like, I don't know, Action, maybe AD mid, ADC, or even AD jungler, like, this is a very good item into heavy AD combo. If you simply want to stat check these ADC champions, Death Stance is also very good for that. Or even Duelist. Like, all around, it's just very good against AD. So if the enemy has that, you can certainly go that. Now, just like Goredrinker, you can go a Gargoyle too, fourth item. Especially with the Shield of Sterex and Gargoyle together, it is a very devastating combo, like we've already explained. So it's kind of like a no-brainer, really. This is like your typical core build, and yeah, that's essentially it. So overall, pros, I would say that this build is very good for sticking onto people. Very good, strong dueling stats as well against squishier champions. When you're ahead, they can never get off you, and you're just an absolute menace to deal with. It's very good for being very disruptive, slowing people, very tanky. Overall, it's just very good, right? The only con is that it's probably not the best melee item, essentially, because there are better builds for that as well. But obviously, it kind of fits into a niche where it's definitely a lot stronger against ranged compared to melee. But, you know, it still does fine overall. Again, just like Renekton usually as well with builds, it can be very cost-effective if you do fall behind. You can feel a little bit useless, which is where I do want to talk about a very good alternative build for that as well. But all in all, Stridebreaker, very good against range, and if you want to play with a different playstyle. Now, it's time to talk about our tank mythics. So, a lot of you guys know that I was advocating tank mythics a lot back in Season 12. I was playing a lot of Frostfire, Sunfire Cape. These items were absolutely devastating with Blair Rune King. And the mythic bonuses that you got too made you a complete beast as well within the game. You'd have so much scaling health or like tenacity stats where you could just literally dominate the whole game, right? And now, tank mythics have definitely took a hit, and they're not like they used to be. They still provide a very good utility purpose that can definitely help game to game. The next tank mythic that I do want to talk about now is Jak'sho. I'll admit, right, I haven't played a lot of Jak'sho myself, but I watch people like RTO play a lot of this build to kind of learn how to use it. And the whole idea of his playstyle compared to a lot of Renekton players is that he does play as a scaling drain tank type of carry. He farms up, he gets these items, and he just simply goes for like 1v3s, right? And while he's so tanky and that he does build those farm leads, he can get away with this build. And while it doesn't have a lot of damage itself, it's more that it has a lot of sustained damage through the fights. So he ends up overthrowing the enemy's damage and just being a complete beast that no one can really take out. If you do put him behind, however, he does feel really weak and that this build doesn't shine as much. So you need to make sure you're always getting those high gold outcomes. You need to make sure you're always getting those high gold outcomes to really make sure this build works. Just like any other build with a tank mythic, Bork first, again, is very good for having that starting damage to help you carry over into your tank mythic. And Jak'sho, while it is expensive, does give you a lot of good stats compared to Evenshroud too. Now, just like any other build with a tank mythic, getting the Bork is always the most important, just due to the fact that, as like I've already mentioned, the damage carryover that Bork presents in being able to pivot to these items is just a no-brainer not to get, right? So it is always just super good to have that, which will then allow you to have that scaling power, that one-shot power against squishes and tank and bruisers, basically anything, right? And that's what allows us to go to the tank mythic easier. So in this case, once we get the tank mythic too, we do have a lot of stats that can work for team fights. Very good in that nature. People do also like to go Ravenous, like I've already said. Ravenous into Jak'sho, that is still a thing. However, I don't feel like it's the best. I feel like your best outcome in a build is certainly going the Blair Rune King into Jak'sho. This will then give you a lot of dueling and combat stats for a tank mythic, which kind of brings back the whole feel of what Sunfire Cape and Frostfire was when it was good. However, with it not being the same, it still does provide some kind of throwback to that, and it does just create like a different path to like being able to be this like sustain tank bruiser, right? And I think after you get the Jak'sho, you can go to the Cleaver, where you get those shred stats and just those all around stats to kind of centering on your build and your playstyle. And that's when you can then go the Death Stance or Ravenous Hydra, maybe even like a Titanic Hydra too. So like a couple paths as well that you could do is you could get a Titanic and then maybe even a Starix, right? However, you're kind of still lacking the durability without a lot of armor magic resist. While Jak'sho does provide that, and you can just get away with this alone, you could also just think about skipping the Titanic and then maybe going into Gargoyle. Gargoyle is also very good again because the whole stats. It is very expensive, but if you do get that on top of everything else, you're going to be a force to be unreckoned with. And I think overall, I think this is a very good build layout here because we have a lot of snowballing stats, we have a lot of tankiness for the fights, a lot of mixture of versatile stats for the game. And then towards the end of the game, we can then round up with these shield builds, go the Starix for the 80 health, and then finish off with the Gargoyle with the 60 armor and 60 magic resist, which is typically good into most things, on top of the big shield that you are getting. So all in all, I think this is like the very best build variant maybe for Jak'sho, in my opinion. However, if you do want to go something else like RTO is doing, you know, feel free. But again, it's not for everyone. But the people that are more like-minded to me, that play the champion as an aggressive champ that wants to take over the game, I highly recommend to go this build path instead. And finally, after this long-winded video, we have the last build. Now, this last build might surprise you, and in my opinion, I think this is a really good build path for the people that are struggling with being weak-sided. So as you guys might know, or, well, I'm sure you do know at this point if you're a Renekton main, the games where we completely get our, like, backside driven into, like, just non-stop, constantly rammed, it is absolutely an awful feel, right? So that's why we have this backup build right here, which can present us with being able to come back from those weak-sided games and give us an opportunity to actually make an impact in the game. So Renekton's biggest problem, I feel like, is definitely when he falls behind, because unlike most champions that do have innate scaling ability with their max health, or even their utility when it comes to fights, max health damage, that's what I was meant to say, it becomes really difficult that you can't really do the same thing as these champions, because Renekton doesn't have any of that. He purely needs a lot of AD or simply a Blair Rune King to do anything. But what if I told you there was another path that you could do that could literally change the game completely for you? This is where we have the Cleaver into Mythic builds right here. So I've been experimenting and I've had a few games with good results. And in the games where even like in my head, it still feels pretty good. So it's even a build where you can use the snowball. The only caveat is that, like, on top of already getting like decent aggressive AD stats, you also get a Mythic that can also help your team out. And I think in the games that are more specifically in high elo, when you do get an item like this, you can make full use of it a lot better than you can in other elos. It's kind of the same thing with Goredrinker too. I feel like Goredrinker usually performs better when you're in a high elo game compared to a low elo game, because the way you play it synergizes a lot better because your teammates are better, simply. That's why usually I'd probably recommend either the Stridebreaker or maybe even just like full AD playstyles in low elo, or like let's say Eclipse, just to narrow it down. So all that being in consideration, I think like a good build for the people that really want something to like help them like come back in the game, I'd recommend this weak side build. So let me explain why this is better for the games where you are behind. As I've already mentioned, Black Cleaver is a very solid item. I've also alluded to this in my previous build guide video, where going Cleaver Rush could actually be pretty good, and that I did fire it against Goredrinker into certain scenarios. And while my opinion has changed a little bit due to the fact that Goredrinker is stronger again, I feel like that as a first item, this is still very good. And being that it's all longswords and ruby crystals, it makes it incredibly easy to build towards. On the flip side, when you counter that, like Goredrinker gives a pickaxe and like a whip and all these other items like from other components, it can be very difficult to have like something that's pretty safe. That's why Black Cleaver fulfills that void and also gives us a safer building approach to the game. So right here, I would say Black Cleaver first is very good just due to the fact, like, all the stats already I mentioned. This is just a god item, what can I say? It is just a very good item. So you get this, and then you can spend your gold on the Radiant or the Evenshroud. Now, you might be wondering, why am I going to go Radiant after the nerfs? Well, the deal is that while it got nerfed, it's still not as bad as people make it out to be. The fact that you still get all these stats is pretty good, and when you compare it alongside Evenshroud, you are being a little bit tankier with it. However, Evenshroud does give a lot of nice stats too. For only 2,300 gold, you are getting quite a decent amount of stat value. The armor, magic resist, even the 10 extra ability haste. The only difference is you're getting 150 health extra from Radiant. So, why am I going to even bother buying Radiant? Well, the thing is, in some games where you're playing, you need to make sure that you can peel for your teammates. Not every game can you be the hero, and there are going to be a lot of games where you're simply just too behind to do anything. And that's why you need to have these backup plans of being able to provide for your team. We can't always provide by being the front line and just like trying to go in, one-shot people, or even just trying to distract, because we're going to get annihilated. Now, the thing with Radiant Virtue is that this allows your teammates to get increased maximum health based on your own, and then it also allows them to heal over time as well. And this heal is still very good, even after the nerfs. It is still very good. So in the games where the enemy has a lot of sustained damage, or even like burst damage, you can just pop your R, and with the lower cooldown on your ult these days, your Radiant value is actually increased, because while you are able to get even more health due to the max health increase from your R, on top of all the other health stacking that you have, everyone's going to heal up a massive amount of health. And this can be the biggest game changer within a fight, because you literally peel for everyone. And essentially, you like more of a Soraka type champion, which is pretty funny to think about. But yeah, it's just like added value, and it just allows your team to thrive a bit more. But if you feel like that's not the option, like if you feel like that you already have damage and you just want them to survive, Radiant is perfect for that. But if you are lacking damage and you already do have tools to survive, like think something like maybe, I don't know, a Xayah with self-peel, perhaps Twitch with a Lulu, something like that. I mean, you can just go Evenshroud too, jump in, W someone, and then they're all going to take increased damage too. So again, I guess it depends on playstyle really. Most typically, I think Evenshroud is kind of the best like all around when you compare them both, because just the stat price, especially if you're weak side already, you're getting your item pretty quickly. So with that in consideration, it's just like a faster power spike. But again, there is a use for Radiant. Again, if you need that healing for your team and you're lacking it against a comp that does a lot of damage, Radiant is good for that. Now, again, it is also a bit more extra gold. 400 extra gold can be a bit difficult to get in these games. So the quicker you get an item spike, the better that you can also activate. So typically, I mean, it kind of really depends, like, if you can get it or not, and if you feel like you want to get it. I'm just offering this as a playstyle because I think it's something people don't know about, and that it can also be a big help towards these games as well that you're playing. Renekton does typically tend to have a lower rate when behind, as does most champions, but he does definitely fit that niche where if you do fall behind, the game is completely over for you. But if you do have a backup plan that can get you into the game with safe components and also give you these power spikes, it can give you a chance to get back in the game. That's why I also offer this as just an alternative for you guys as well. So with all that being said, that's mainly it. And I guess if you're going to like round the items up, you can then get like a Sterak's, get your other typical like health items if you can afford them. Maybe a Gargoyle, maybe Randuins. We're playing more utility focused with this build. So excuse my mistyping, but we get this here. Like, this build would be really good into, like, a really heavy AD comp. But if we want to also, like, kind of change that up, maybe get something that helps us, maybe Force of Nature. Or Spirit Visage. I think Spirit Visage could be very good with this build. It's just the fact that the build components just absolutely suck, though. That's the only problem here. But if you can get it, you are giving yourself increased healing and shield value. And for a build that already has shields and heals, like, it's actually pretty good, right? We'll have to throw the Radiant out if we wanted this, but it could be just a good build, like, if you had that in mind. And that's something I would like to try myself. But yeah, guys, that is it for my build guide video. We've discussed a lot of things today within this video. It's also took me quite a few recording attempts, which you might have noticed, possibly, due to the fact that I've been very busy. I've been able to just sit down and do a video. But here that I've now finished it, I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I have put a lot of work in to explain things, obviously by all the infographics that you're seeing on the screen too. So yeah, like, I am planning to do more videos. I'm trying to get that educational and informative based content back onto my channel. I've been very busy, as you guys know, with like my life and everything. So trying to sit down and make these videos can be quite difficult. But nevertheless, I try to get that content out there. And if you guys feel better as well that you have more of an understanding of what to go now, especially since all these item changes, you know, I feel grateful for that, right? That I can provide that for you guys. Yeah, next I do have some other videos coming out, but I'm also not going to talk much about them, just in case if they don't. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. If you did, and you'd like to see this style of content, where I do go very in-depth and explain everything one by one, make sure to leave it in the comments below, like the video, subscribe, and also make sure to check out my TikTok as well. I do post some content on there as well. Stream highlights, and also like little guide things as well, if you guys are interested. I do have a Discord server. I also do stream as well. I stream on twitch.tv, Godrekton_. So if you want to see me there and talk to me about anything, leave me a question over there. But I really appreciate you guys watching the video today. Hope you guys learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, and have a great day.